Hello everyone, this is Patrick. Welcome back to another Palm OFCC, where I attempt to do 25 minutes of free code camp a day, every day, hopefully. Uh, this weekend I was going to take one day off and just, do one day of FCC or one Palm of FCC, and I ended up not doing any over the weekend. So today is Monday. I got some coffee. It's early morning. Let's go ahead and knock this one out. Excuse me, I was taking a sip of my coffee. Sorry if you heard that. All right, let's start our Pomodoro timer and jump right in. All right, let's go to the curriculum. I believe we were on applied visual design. Yes. Okay, we were messing with text stuff. So let's go ahead and start here. Set the font weight for multiple heading elements. Set the font size of each heading tag, the last challenge. Here you'll adjust the font weight. Font weight property sets how thick or thin characters are in a section of text. So we got to change all these font weights to the proper 100. This one's going to be 600. You can see how they change on the side over here. This one's going to be 600. That didn't seem to change at all. 500. That one's a little bit thinner. 400. You see it makes the weight of them a little bit less. This one's going to be all right. Pretty easy challenge there. Let's run the test. Yep. All right. Set the font size of paragraph text. Font size property in CSS is not limited to headings. It can be applied to any element containing text. Change the value of the font size property for paragraph to 16 pixels to make it more readable. 10 pixels is way too small, especially for these old eyes. There we go. It's a little bit more readable. Alright, CSS offers the line height property to change the height of each line in a block of text. As the name suggests, it changes the amount of vertical space that each line of text gets. So we're going to change line height to 25 pixels. Spreads it out a little bit more, makes it a little bit more readable. Yep. Right, this challenge will touch on the usage of pseudo classes. Pseudo class is a keyword that can be added to selectors in order to select a specific state of an element. For example, the styling of an anchor tag can be changed for its hover state using the hover pseudo class selector. Here is the CSS. Change the color of an anchor tag to red during its hover state. So as you can see, you use a colon and hover, and then you can put CSS in there. The CSS code editor has a CSS rule to style all tags black. Add a rule so that when the user hovers over the A tag, the color is blue. So we're going to do A : hover. We're going to do color blue. So when you hover over this, it should turn blue. Go. It turns blue. Another thing you can do, you can change the font size to say 30 pixels. And then hover, boom, you see it makes it bigger. But that's not what it's asking for. I just wanted to show that you could do a lot of stuff with the hover and run test. Yep. Alright, change an element's relative position. CSS treats each HTML element as its own box, which is usually referred to as the CSS box model. Block level items automatically start on a new line, like headings, paragraphs, divs, while inline items sit within the surrounding content, like images or spans. The default layout of elements in this way is called the normal flow of the document. What CSS offers is the position property to override it. When the position of an element is set to relative, it allows you to specify how CSS should move it relative to its current position in the normal flow of the page. It pairs with the CSS offset properties of left, right, top, or bottom. This says how many pixels, percentages, or ems to move the item away from where it is normally positioned. The following example moves the paragraph 10 pixels away from the bottom. Okay. Changing an element's position to relative does not remove it from the normal flow. Okay, sorry. I didn't realize the idea sentence ended there. Does not remove it from the normal flow. Other elements around it still behave as if that item were in the default position. Positioning gives you a lot of flexibility and power over the visual layout of a page. It's good to remember that no matter the position of elements, the underlying HTML markup should be organized and make sense when read from top to bottom. This is how users with visual impairments who rely on assistive services like screen readers access your content. Change the position of H2 to relative and use a CSS offset to move it 15 pixels away from the top of where it sits in the normal flow. Notice there is no impact on the positions of the surrounding H1 and P elements. Alright, so we're going to type in position, relative, and then put top, right? Top, 15 pixels. Let's see how this moves. 15 pixels. Okay, so I moved it down, away from the top. 15 pixels. Alright, this should pass. Alright, move a relatively positioned element with CSS offsets. CSS offsets the top, bottom, left, or right tell the browser how far to offset an item to where it would sit in the normal flow of the document. You're offsetting an element away from a given spot, which moves the element away from the reference side, effectively the opposite direction. Like you saw in the last challenge, using the top offset, move the H2 downwards. Likewise, using a left offset, move the item to the right. So here you can see you use top, it moves down. If you use bottom, it moves up, and then left and right, the opposite. Use CSS offsets to move H2 down, or move H2 15 pixels to the right and 10 pixels up. Okay, so we're going to use to the right, so it means we need to use left 15 pixels, and then we want to move it up, so we're going to use bottom 10 pixels. So we use the opposite. Yep. And this should pass. Does. Alright, lock an element with its parent with absolute positioning. The next option for CSS position property is absolute, which locks the element in place relative to its parent's container. Unlike the relative position, this removes the element from the normal flow of the document, so surrounding items ignore it. The CSS offset properties, top or bottom, left or right, are used to adjust the position. One nuance with absolute positioning is that it will be locked relative to its closest positioned ancestor. If you forget to add a position rule to the parent item, which is typically done using position relative, the browser will keep looking up the chain and ultimately default to the body tag. Lock the search bar element to the top right of its section parent. So section, hold on, let's look at the HTML here for a second. You have a section and then a form within the section. Section is part of the body, but H1 is separate. So H1 and section are children of body. Okay. Lock the search bar element to the top right of its section parent by declaring its position to absolute. Give it top right offsets of 50 pixels each. Okay. So position absolute. Right. Top 50 pixels. Right. Oh no, wait. We gotta do this. It's gotta be bottom. No, it says top. Doesn't say move it to the top, it just says put top right. 50 pixels. Okay. That is the top right of its section parent. Is it? Let's do background color gray so we could see this section. Yeah, it don't work. Color black. Guess won't let us change the background color of section. Well, form. Trying to see how this works here. We do a border. 2 pixels solid black. Will that work? Okay, so it's not really in the top right. There's some padding here. I thought it was going to be like really close to the top here. It's interesting. We cut this. Where does it show up at? Okay. So let's go back through this and see how it changes compared to that border. So position, absolute. Okay. So basically what it did was kind of pull it out of the flow, because you can see the border shrunk to like a single line. Which is interesting. So then moved it down, and then this is interesting. So by putting in top, it moved it down. But when I put in right, it moves it right. That is interesting. Because when we did it previously, when we put in right, it moved it left. Yet this one, it moves it right. So like we put in 50 pixels there, it moves to the right. That's interesting. Let's I don't want to look at the form for this. Let's watch a video maybe. Let's open this in a new tab. Let's watch a video. Gonna play? I wonder if it's my browser since I'm using Brave browser. Let me turn the shields off. Let's try this. That's what it is. Hold on. You can't hear this. I want you to hear this because maybe they'll explain it. You can hear it as well.
We talked about relative position. Now we're going to talk about absolute position. So unlike the relative position, this is going to remove the element from its normal flow of the document, so the surrounding items ignore it. They'll be absolutely positioned on the page. So you do position absolute, just like instead of position relative, position absolute, we're still going to use the top, bottom, left, right, and it will always be based on the parent element. So in this example, you can see that this search bar here, the search bar right here, is positioned inside this section. So the section has relative positioning, and the search bar has absolute positioning within the section. So in this challenge, we're going to give this the top position of 50 pixels, and then a right position of 50 pixels. And then we'll see how that moves when I refresh the page here. And you can see it moved on the page a little bit. you'll be able to see more of how it changes if we actually make some more changes. I'll change this to 100 pixels and see what happens. So you can see it's even pushed further to the side here. And so if I change this to 200 pixels, it'll be pushed even further to the left, and it actually goes off the page. But let's go back to 50 pixels. That's what we had to do for the challenge here. Okay.
Okay, so that's interesting. Let's go back to here. So was it actually moving it to the left? So if I do 150, so it is moving it to the left. What if I took it out altogether? So that moved it all the way to the left. All right. 200 pixels. Okay. 50 pixels. All right, so it's moving it relative to the section, right? So it's moving it right 50 pixels from the section, I guess. It's kind of confusing. He explained it a little bit. So it is moving to the left. So it is moving the opposite way. That was my question. Like, because when we were looking at it and typing it in, it looked like it was moving to the right, even though we put in right. Technically, it's moving to the left, even though we saw it move to the right and then move to the left. So as this grows, it moves more to the left. See, it's interesting how that works. I guess it's kind of a feel thing to know that, you know, how to position your stuff absolute and relative. It's not intuitive, I guess you can say. But I mean, let's go ahead and run this test so you can pass it and close that little tab there. Still a little confusing to me how that works. I guess because relative to its parent. Interesting. All right. I'm like kind of at I'm kind of stuck here because I'm trying to I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Visualize, I guess you could say, how the absolute affects it versus the relative. So like if we change this to relative, what would it look like? Okay. See, that's more of what I imagined. All right, so absolutes just removes it from the flow, but it doesn't tell you exactly where it's moving it from. It locks the element in place relative to its parent container. Huh. Okay. I'm probably just going to need more practice at this. Alright, run the test. Alright, next challenge. Lock an element to the browser window with fixed positioning. So I guess it's not going to go over any more absolute positioning. Maybe it's something you get around in CSS. You don't really need to use it. The next layout scheme that CSS offers is the fixed position, which is a type of absolute positioning. So fixed is also absolute. That locks an element relative to the browser window. Similar to absolute, it's used within the CSS offset properties and also removes the element from the normal flow of the document. Other items no longer realize where it is positioned, which may require some layout adjustments elsewhere. One key difference between the fixed and absolute position is that an element with a fixed position won't move when a user scrolls. So like see how I'm scrolling this, or scrolling down here, this doesn't move. This like free code can't. There would be a fixed position element. This top little bar here. The navigation bar in the code is labeled with an ID of navbar. Right. Change its position to fixed and offset it 0 pixels from the top, 0 from the left. After you have added the code, scroll the preview window to see how the navigation stays in place. So see here it moves. So we're going to do position fixed. Okay. We're going to do top 0. And we're going to do left 0. Okay, so now it's fixed, so it'll never go away. But of course, you would have to adjust the margin, I believe, or maybe the padding on the body top, so that like that would move down a little bit, so it wouldn't look like it's disappearing back there. All right, that should pass. All right, push elements left or right with the float property. The next positioning tool does not actually use position, but sets the float property of an element. Floating elements are removed from the normal flow of a document and pushed to either the left or right of their containing element. It's commonly used with the width property to specify how much horizontal space the floated element requires. The given markup would work well as a 2-column layout, with the section aside elements next to each other. Okay. Give the left item a float of left and the right item a float of right. Push to either the left or right of their containing parent element. This is going to float left. Doesn't do anything, but when you put float right. Okay, there we go. So it floats them within the parent element. I know there's ways to do this using like you don't really have to use this. Like they have Flexbox and Grid, which helps do stuff like this a little bit easier than using floats. All right, run the test. There we go. Change the position of overlapping elements with the z-index property. When elements are positioned to overlap, i.e. using position, absolute, relative, fixed, sticky, didn't teach us sticky, the element coming later in the HTML markup will by default appear at the top of the other elements. However, the z-index property can specify the order of how elements are stacked on top of another. Must be an integer, i.e. a whole number, not a decimal. Higher values for the z-index property of an element move it higher in the stack than those with a lower value. So here we got div class first, which is the red box, and then second is the blue box. The blue box shows up on top because it is later in the HTML. Add a z-index property with the class name of first to the element with the class name of first, the red rectangle, and set it a value of 2 so it covers the other element. So what we're going to do is z-index of 2, and it should move. There we go. Moves over to the top. And that makes sense. That's pretty easy. All right, next challenge. Center an element horizontally using the margin property. Another positioning technique is to center a block horizontally. One way to do this is to set its margin to a value of auto. This method works for images too. Images are inline elements by default, but they can be changed to block elements when you set the display to block. Center the div on the page by adding a margin property with the value of auto. Margin auto. And there it goes, it centers it. Okay. Learn about complementary colors. Color theory and its impact on design is a deep topic, and only the basics are covered in the following challenges. On a website, color can draw attention to content, evoke emotions, or create visual harmony. Using different combinations of colors can really change the look of a website, and a lot of thought can go into picking a color palette that works with your content. Color wheel is a useful tool to visualize how colors relate to each other. It's a circle where similar hues are neighbors and different hues are further apart. When two colors are opposite each other on the wheel, they're called complementary colors. They have the characteristic that if they are combined, they cancel each other out and create a gray color. However, when placed side by side, these colors appear more vibrant and produce a strong visual contrast. Some examples of complementary colors in their hex codes are red and cyan, green and magenta, blue and yellow. This is different than the outdated RYB color model that many of us were taught in school, which has different primary and complementary colors. Modern color theory uses additive RGB model and the subtractive CMYK model, like in printing. Read more information on this complete subject. Funny thing, this is a side note here. About to run out of time on the tomato timer, but the CMYK is what they use in printing, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So if you ever let's close this tomato timer. Our 25 minutes is up, so I'm just gonna talk about this real quick. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, right? So you may wonder, like, what does this mean? So when they print newspapers, all right, when you see a picture in a newspaper or a magazine, those are usually printed with offset presses. And basically what offset presses print is a bunch of dots, right? Or even a printer that you would have on your desk. When you print color, like a color picture, it's a bunch of dots. Those dots, when printed, are either a cyan dot, a magenta dot, a yellow dot, or a black dot. And those colors overlapping each other are all kind of transparent except for the black. But all those colors overlapping each other give you pretty much every color you'll ever need to print. Now RGB is like what you see in a computer screen, which all the dots on your computer screen, which is your resolution, are either a red, green, or blue dot, and those overlapping give you all your colors. But how do you get CMYK from RGB? They seem so different. This is red, green, blue. This is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which is like, there's no green here. Magenta, I guess you could say, is like red, and cyan is like blue. But actually, if you take red and green light and put them together, you get, I believe, yellow. And if you take green and blue and put them together, you get cyan. And you take blue and red and put them together, and you get magenta. So that's how they came up with the CMYK alert. And then you put in black to put in your darker tones. So that's a bit of a side. I'm not an expert on that in any way. I'm going to go ahead and finish reading this, and then when we come back tomorrow, we'll do this challenge. There are many color picking tools available online that have an option to find complement color. Note, using color can be a powerful way to add visual interest to a page. However, color alone should not be used as the only way to convey important information, because users with visual impairments may not understand that content. This issue has been covered in more detail in applied accessibility challenges. So if somebody's colorblind and looking at your page, don't use color to imply something's of importance. You can use text size, bold, strong, emphasis. Is way better to use in color, because somebody might not even be able to tell that color is different. So, all right, that's the end of this video. Sorry about my little bit of rambling about CMYK and RGB there at the end. If you happen to watch this, thank you for watching. Remember, this is an accountability thing for myself. I really want to finish Free Code Camp. I've messed with this before. I've done some of the challenges in this. I've done some of the projects in this. I wanted to start over because I've been out of coding for a little while, and I kind of want to get back into it. Not necessarily only to find like a new career or anything like that, but to, just further my education. I'm a true believer, never stop learning. I'm also learning Spanish right now through Duolingo. Love the app. That's going more slowly, but I just kind of take my time. I want to do that every day. I've actually been doing that every day. I'm on a 10-day streak in Duolingo. But yeah, let me quit rambling about myself, and I will catch you all tomorrow, hopefully.